guys, welcome to Relatable. Today I am talking to Bridget Phetasy. She is a comedian, she is a writer, she is a podcaster, she is an interesting, down-to-earth, very unique person, and I'm so excited to hear your perspective. She has kind of become a political, cultural commentator over the past few years, but she's just got a very interesting life story. Now, this is going to be a little bit different of a conversation. We're not on the same page on a variety of issues. On a lot of important issues we are, but we have a different theological, religious perspective. We've got different perspectives on social issues, on cultural issues, probably even quite a few political issues. But I just love her. I love talking to her. I know that you're going to be encouraged by her story. We're going to talk about addiction. We're going to talk about sobriety. We're going to talk about God and marriage and starting a family and all of that stuff. I wouldn't maybe listen to this conversation with kids around. There's some things that you're maybe not used to hearing on Relatable, but I know you're going to love this conversation. So without further ado, here is Bridget. Bridget, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Can you tell everyone who may not know who you are and what you do?
Yes. My name is Bridget Phetasy, and I am a writer, comedian, and I have a podcast and a YouTube show. The podcast is called Watkins Welcome, and the YouTube show is called Dumpster Fire. And I'm just a wife and human.
You're a human.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me why your YouTube show is called Dumpster Fire.
So Dumpster Fire evolved. I had been wanting to do it for a while, but I luckily have a producing partner, my cousin, who always dials me, will put a little bit of hold on things, projects that I'm ready to go on. We were getting the podcast started and had to get that plate spinning. And then the podcast is much more thoughtful. It's like one-on-one interviews. You've been on it. And it's not always serious. I often have comedians and it's fun, but it's definitely more soulful, I think. And Dumpster Fire, it was in I think it was leading up to, it was like 2019. I guess we just celebrated 2 years. So 2 years ago, I always felt like people were misinterpreting my tweets in particular, just because I would be kind of snarky or sarcastic and people would take it seriously. And I'm like, I wish people could hear this tone. And I had been wanting to do just a show making fun of like the insanity of everything. And we were leading into the 2020 election and it was just so crazy. And I needed a place to put all that crazy. And so we started Dumpster Fire in my garage, basically, just as a way for me to be like, blah, very different than Watkins Welcome. And that's
just about like politics, life, anything.
Culture, anything. I mean, we make fun of ourselves. Our whole kind of mantra is that we'll make burgers out of your sacred cows. That's just like our whole thing. And it could be anything. I mean, we were making fun of Russell Brand barely, like just teasing him. And our audience was so mad. And I was like, oh, you didn't think that was when we said your sacred cows?
Yeah.
You didn't realize that it meant you too. Yeah. So we just have fun, and it's my cousin and my former roommate, and they're on the other side of the camera. So there's a lot of banter. People always joke and say, it's one of the meaner comments, I guess, was if I wanted to feel like I was standing at a waitress station, I would go back to work in the restaurant industry. And I was like, I'm doing my job if that's what this feels like.
Yeah.
I want it to just feel it's very kind of populist, I think. We make fun of like the olds and the poors, and we just are irreverent.
Yeah. And you are not necessarily a conservative, or do you consider yourself a conservative?
No, I think socially I still don't share a lot of the values. And I come from being very much a liberal, although I don't necessarily share a lot of the social values there, the more extreme ones lately. And so I think like many people, I would call myself politically homeless. I'm a registered independent now. I know that means nothing and seems kind of wishy-washy, but I just can't, I don't feel like I belong really anywhere.
And you used to be a Democrat, though? You used to be a
Oh,
registered
yeah,
Democrat. And then how did that evolve? Why are you now an independent?
In 2015, it really started. I think a lot of it had to do with getting sober. I got sober in 2013 and just started writing for Playboy in 2015 and stumbled into the culture wars, knowing nothing about the culture wars, by the way. I didn't go to college. I'd been waiting tables and drinking and just trying to be a writer, but mostly trying to do fiction and comedy in LA and do like scripted fictions. And wasn't on Twitter, wasn't on any kind of, I just wasn't involved. And when I started writing for Playboy, I started doing Twitter in 2013 when I got sober because I needed something to do with my lots of excess time. And it became my new drug of choice. And I stumbled into the comedy and writers, and I was like, oh, these are my people, the writers. And I suddenly understood what you could do with Twitter as a comedian or a writer. Mm-hmm. It was like the Family Guy writers, and they were so funny. And I didn't even know political Twitter existed. I was just operating in a completely separate space. And then I started writing for Playboy because it was more social stuff and commentary on, I mean, I really was like a chick from the Maxim years who stumbled into this kind of fourth wave feminism of very online millennials. And I did not know, I thought I would get very criticized by the right, and I did, but I had no idea how much I would get from the left for saying things like real man, and I didn't know that.
So why were you criticized by people on the right? Like, what were some of the things that you were talking about?
I mean, I was like showing my boobs online and just a lot of being feminist, like, so this is the downfall of society is women like you. And
so you saw yourself as like genuine girl power, female empowerment type feminist, but
I didn't even see myself as a feminist. Yeah, that's what's funny.
You were just saying what you.
I was just being like, I was having fun, and I did rage against a lot of the double standards that I felt like existed between men and women. And I was very behind the like free the nipple, and I just also am kind of I think I was working through a lot of stuff too. Just working through a lot. I was raised Catholic, very Catholic, so I had a lot of guilt around sexuality. I was raped when I was 17, so I had a lot of trauma. I just was a hypersexual, hyperactive slut for many years, and proudly, obviously, at the time, and felt like I could kind of heal myself through promiscuity. Fun fact, that didn't turn out to be the case.
Yeah.
But I really there was a whole system that supported a lot of that mentality.
Yeah.
And I also think that what I've really come to terms with is that I think because I was dating such D-bags and I was not choosing the best men, obviously, not putting myself in great situations. I was still partying and drinking, and I was in cities, and men have many options in cities, and I was choosing always the kind of player guys because I like the challenge. And I just told myself that I would be single forever, that I didn't want kids. And a big part of me, because of my history, just felt worthless and like I didn't deserve love or any of that if I dig under a lot of the kind of lies I was telling myself on top. So I think with a lot of that was playing out, but I was also writing to men at a time when men were really on the defense, which it was a weird time to be writing for men in 2015. And I was like, guy's girl. I wasn't like one of those people I wasn't feminist and I wasn't anti-man, and I didn't feel like the patriarchy was holding me down. And so it was interesting to be writing for all these men at a time when they were so much on the defense. And I felt like people who are screaming toxic masculinity and telling men to get in touch with their feelings were also telling them to sit down and shut up. And there was a lot of paradox around that.
Yeah.
And that's when I started getting attacked from the left, was just for internalizing
misogyny,
yeah.
So on the one hand, conservatives were criticizing you for maybe being too libertine-ish or being what they saw as some kind of radical feminist who was showing your boobs online. And then people on the left were mad because you weren't mad enough at men and you weren't demonizing men enough. So that's kind of how you found yourself in the middle of culture wars without even really trying to be in the middle.
No,
of culture
not at
wars.
all. I mean, I was learning terms faster than I didn't know anything. I knew nothing. And then what started happening was 2015 was right around the rise of Trump.
Yeah.
And everyone kind of started losing their mind. But all these feminists were criticizing Ivanka and Melania. And I was like, guys, I thought we were supposed to just not be criticizing a woman for her looks or whatever she was wearing. And I was seeing so much hypocrisy, and that was frustrating to me. I'm like, let's criticize their ideas like we've been talking about, or you've been talking about. And I was starting to, through writing to all these men, and it was really when I started listening to a lot of their own struggles, and I always kind of had this idea that men just had it easier. And hearing what they had gone through with things like erectile dysfunction, balding, all of these problems that men deal with, not feeling like they can show their emotions or cry, and having men write me these long essays telling me how they were feeling about different aspects of their emotional landscape was really eye-opening to me. But also because of the kind of red-blooded American male that I was speaking to and hearing from, I was exposed to a more center-right conservative man.
And they were writing to you as you were writing for Playboy, or just because they found you on Twitter?
No, they were writing to me because I would say, have an idea for a topic. And on Twitter, I'd say, hey, guys, I'm writing a piece about balding. Send me an email to blah, blah, blah. And I would get these long essays from men about their experience. And they were moving. I would be crying reading some of these things.
Talking about just how hard it is to...
Yeah. I mean, the grief really, that's what I really realized reading all of these emails, was that there was a profound sense of loss, almost like you experience when you lose someone you love. It is a grieving process because you're grieving this death of a part of you. And it was just fascinating. And then I would go into a lot of the research about it and different studies, and so I was still mouthing off on Twitter at the time. And I think the first time that I really realized how, I mean, I never really thought I knew much, but I was a very mouthy kind of liberal, just thinking that I knew all the things, like I was in the right. And there was a school shooting. I don't remember which one, sadly. And I was mouthing off about it. And then my audience, which had been, I'd been cultivating through Playboy, they pushed back, and I was like, whoa. I read some of the comments, and they were very thoughtful. They were just like, this isn't blah, blah, blah. So I had them write me essays about what their opinion was on this.
So you had said something about it being about guns or something?
I said something like, we need to take something very just, and when they were commenting, I stopped and I was like, oh, I don't know anything about guns. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how to hold a gun. I couldn't load one at the time. I couldn't tell you what a single gun law in California is. I don't know what you have to do to get, I know nothing about this, and I'm mouthing off about it. And that was really the beginning of recognizing how absolutely nothing, I knew nothing about anything. And as that process started, I just started getting curious, and I wasn't somebody who was like paying attention to politics. I just had my head down and I was working, trying to get through the day. I think many Americans got pulled off of the kind of apolitical sidelines in the past 5-6 years for similar reasons. They just were forced into it, whether it was like they got kicked out of a mommy group for saying something, or they stepped over lines they didn't know existed. And that's when I really stumbled. So then I started writing more political things. Not political, just cultural things. I wrote a piece for Playboy, which I was shocked they let me write, called it was all about like the silver lining of like the Trump if he won, but I posted it on Inauguration Day. And it was just not good. Like,
so
people
just talking
weren't
about,
ready
hey,
for
here's
it.
some positive,
Yeah.
here's some positive things, and that was like the height of people's anger, because that was also like that
That was,
crazy
like, the-
women's march
yeah,
too,
the
with
pink
the
hat.
hats
Yeah.
and all that. So people were just not, they didn't have the appetite for silver
I
lining
shed
at the moment.
like 600, I think 800 followers immediately right after posting it.
Yeah.
And that's when people started calling me kind of a right wing.
Did you vote for Trump in 2016?
No, I
Yeah.
voted for Hillary.
Yeah.
I was like, I voted for her for the worst, lamest reasons. I didn't like her. I just wanted to be able to say to my niece that I voted for Hillary, like that I voted for the first female president if she won. Not even really thinking like my brother and his family, like they're not exactly like
Yeah.
Hillary supporters. Like,
Yeah.
she probably would have been like, why?
Yeah. Why'd you do that for me? I didn't ask you to.
And also, like, you're an idiot. It's like, wow, you shouldn't admit that.
Okay, first sponsor for the day is Alliance Defending Freedom. As you guys know, there are many people who have chosen, for a variety of reasons, not to get the vaccine. Maybe they have conscience objections. Maybe they have health reasons. Whatever the reason is, people should be free to make the choice that they want to make, whether or not you agree with it. No matter your opinion on the vaccine itself, the fact of the matter is the federal government trying to force people and manipulate people by taking away their freedom of choice is a form of authoritarianism. And it's important that we use every legal means possible to raise a respectful ruckus and to push back on this. Alliance Defending Freedom is an organization that is doing that super effectively. They're pushing back against this government overreach. They're taking this to the courts. They're going to take it all the way to the Supreme Court if they have to, but they need our help. It's really important that we support the people who are on the front lines. ADF is on the front lines of this fight. So go to adflegal.org/Allie, make a tax-deductible donation to ADF's Freedom Fund. Ensure they have the resources necessary to continue their challenges in court. Go to adflegal.org/Allie, adflegal.org/Allie. But okay, so that was your reason, though. In 2016, you published that. 2017 beginning inauguration. And then would you say that you evolved even more like while Trump was president, or did you kind of stay in that messy middle of being like, well, I still don't like what Trump is saying or doing over here, but also the left is kind of crazy? Like, how did you navigate the Trump years?
Not great. I mean, I navigated them, but I never liked his character.
Yeah.
Somebody sent me something leading up to 2020 that really stuck with me. They said, I could never vote for Trump, even though I like him, but I like his policies or even just not like leaving us alone for the most part, and support that. I could never vote for him and look myself in the mirror and tell myself that character mattered. And that was something that resonated with me because I felt, even though I didn't vote for Biden or Trump in 2020, I abstained from voting for a president. Because I just don't want to be bullied into voting either. And everybody was bullying me on both sides. You know, they're like, you're not. I'm like, I'm in California. A, my vote doesn't matter. B, you can't bully me into voting either way. I hate that. So I just felt, it was hard though to navigate because not knowing anything, not having like a poli-sci degree, not following politics other than left-wing talking points and NPR. I just wrote an essay about how that NPR was like my personality, and because I was in primarily left-wing environments, I was never challenged, and I just thought I was right, and everybody agreed with me.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have to think things through. I was lucky to have people who would push back, but that was really, those kind of messy years were when I relied on, weirdly, I had to kind of rely on never Trumpers because they were the people who were pushing back against Trump from the conservative side. And but some of them were reasonable enough to, it was hard to figure out, is this something every president has done that's being completely blown out of proportion because it's Trump? Or is this something
truly unprecedented?
That's truly unprecedented because it's Trump. And so navigating that was hard, and trying to stay balanced and just figure out, like, is this unprecedented, or is this just a normal thing that's being... that was tough. But then I started doing right-wing media because they were the only people who would talk to me. I really wanted to talk to the left and be like, you guys should care about the fact that you're pushing people like me away. And
why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that the right seems to now be more welcoming of heterodox views? Like you coming on my show, I'm a conservative evangelical. We probably disagree on a lot of things. We know we disagree on a lot of things. But maybe someone on the left wouldn't welcome you on their show because you are too heterodox, or you're just not quite in line with what they deem acceptable.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think the things that you and I agree on are basic first principles, like freedom of speech and the ability to have a conversation, and the ability to disagree, and the ability to maintain your own opinion and debate these things vigorously. And that is something that the left has seemed to they've lost that completely. Where they don't want to hear dissent, they want to shut it down. They don't want to hear people who might be pushing back. I just felt like I was a kind of repeat customer at a bar that got taken for granted. And then there were all these like new hipsters, and they started catering to them, and they stopped serving, like Bud Light or whatever. And I've had to find a new bar, and they didn't really want me there anyways anymore. So I got called a lot of names, obviously, like a reactionary. And I also I was in comedy at the time, so I was seeing it in the sex area, where there was this weird kind of puritanism coming from the left around sex and gender, and a lot of wanting to, like, the policing of bodies that I felt was strange, coming from what I thought was a kind of free-spirited party. And then,
like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by, like, the policing of bodies from the left?
The talking about the way you're allowed to talk about bodies or not allowed to talk about bodies, the like weird stuff that was coming down around women, like the birthing persons and
people
chest feeding and people with uteruses, which to me sounds like the language of a serial killer. Or the way a misogynist might talk. It was very strange. I didn't know how to get my mind around it. I certainly was like many Americans and didn't know. I wasn't very online and didn't know all of the lingo and pronouns and they bees and a lot of this stuff. And I really realized a part of me was like, maybe I'm just old. And I'm like, get off my lawn. I felt like an old person. And I'm like, maybe I'm just old. And maybe it is that old saying that if you're a liberal in your 20s, whatever it is, like the one where it's like, if you're
if you're a liberal before you're 40, you have no brain. If you're a liberal, or if you're conservative before you're 40, you have no heart.
Yeah, something like that. Or like if
something like that. You're supposed to be old and conservative, basically.
Right. And perhaps that happens naturally with many people, where they get older and they realize that a lot of those idealistic values that they had when they were young, in real life practicality, aren't quite as realistic as they might have seemed when you're 20 and you're like, woo. But I also do think that the left just went super far left. So there was a lot of language around sexuality in the body, and it just seemed like they were having less sex than ever before too, which was strange. And then there's like all this talk about, there's this weird antinatalism now. This is a thing that's been really coming up all the time lately, which I think is kind of dangerous. And I was also, through sobriety and therapy and a lot of work, coming to terms with a lot of the lies that I was telling myself about sex and love and a lot of the stuff that I bought into, which wasn't really leaving me feeling great about myself at all. And so, yeah, it was like I felt like I was growing up in public, because then I started doing media just to talk about a lot of this stuff. And because they were the only people who wanted to talk to me, I got labeled like, that classic like grifter or
right wing
reactionary and Nazi and carrying water for Nazis and white supremacists. I mean, it was
all
the
that
whole
good
thing.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the antinatalism, I want to talk to you about that. And I heard something interesting from someone who, she labels herself like a progressive Christian. Like, we could not disagree on more things. Even though she calls herself a Christian, we probably disagree on more things than you and I do, because she's so far left on so many things. But one thing that she said that I thought was interesting that she posted on Instagram was that she tends to only see people on her side of the political aisle, on the left side of the political aisle, be so blatantly sometimes anti-children. That doesn't mean that everyone on the left is, but when she sees that, just anti-child rhetoric, like she was actually talking about a specific TikTok video where someone was like, F them kids, like, I don't feel bad, when people are mean to kids, whatever. And she made a good point. She was like, children are super marginalized in the world. Why is it only that people on the left seem to be so comfortable with being blatantly anti-children? She said, I never see that on the right. Why do you think that is? Even knowing that, of course, most leftists don't feel that way, hopefully, about kids. But you do see that just kind of like ugliness about kids and childbirth from progressives sometimes. Yeah. It's disturbing to me.
Yeah, it's weird. I think I would say for me, it was a lot of self-deception. I didn't have like anti-kids thing. I always loved kids. And I'm the oldest of 5. But I was like, I'm not going to have kids. It's just not for me. But it was more, it was one part selfishness, other part, I really realized now looking back that I wanted a family, not just a kid. And so because I wasn't dating good men and I didn't have somebody that I loved, kids weren't even an option, because I wasn't just looking for a kid. I was looking for like the whole thing. I didn't want to raise a kid without a dad, and it's totally possible to do it. But I come from divorce, and I didn't want to have to put a child through that if I could avoid it by marrying somebody that I kind of knew I wasn't really in love with, just to have a kid. And I never really was into the idea of just having a child for the sake of having a child, although I completely understand why a woman would want to. And I just told myself I didn't want kids. It was easier for me to just tell myself I didn't want kids than confront all of that I wasn't dating the right men, that I wasn't in love, that I didn't feel like I deserved love or kids because of my slutty past and because of choices that I had made and addiction and all kinds of things, that I didn't think I'd be a good mom. I mean, so much.
So those were some of the fears and the lies that you were believing that you think were being masked by you just telling yourself, well, I just don't want kids.
Yeah, and also just, and maybe even going over the top and being like, those are just for like the breeders, and I don't need to do that. And I can just be a single woman and crush it. And so that was my experience of it. I'm not sure what's going on with this next generation down. It seems like, and I say there's an element of selfishness too, because how was I going to pay for a kid? I was a waitress who was still trying to like get by. So it's amazing really, like a lot, the lies that we do tell ourselves to just justify a lot of the situation we might find ourselves in, decisions we're making that might not be great. And also just my circumstances that I didn't feel like were great for bringing a child into the world. But also, I just wanted to like party and have fun and travel, and I would have rather done that than have to be responsible for another life. And it was easy to say something. I think I'm pretty sure there must have been in my 20s. I'm sure if I find my journals, I know I was very worried about the environment, and I'm sure I had that like, what's the point of bringing a kid into the world? I can just live, and it's like justifying my own selfish desires
by making it seem
by
selfless,
making
though.
it seem political. Exactly. Like cool.
I'm doing
and selfless.
something for the world by not having a child and just traveling and doing the things.
Right. When it really is like the prime act, I think, of getting out of yourself. But yeah, I mean, I've been through a lot of those. They're very basic evolutions. I see a lot of people go through them.
Okay, second sponsor for today is a wonderful sponsor, and that is Dwell. It is a Bible app. It's inspired by the directive in Scripture to hide God's word in our hearts. Dwell understands that people are busy, especially you moms out there. You feel like you are going a million miles a minute, that you've got so many people and tasks that are demanding your attention, and maybe you just feel overwhelmed by the prospect of waking up an hour earlier to read the Bible. Sometimes that's not even possible because somehow your kids always find a way to wake up 30 minutes sooner than you do. But it's still important for us to prioritize reading, studying, retaining the Word of God. Dwell app makes that really easy. They have over a dozen new recordings of the Bible. They have handpicked voices that engage and inspire you so that you can listen to the scriptures even as you are doing the million tasks that you have to do. But if you do have time to sit down and read the Bible, they also have a read-along experience. It lets you read big, bold, beautiful text even while listening to the Bible. And that really helps you retain and understand what the Bible is actually saying. So your time in Scripture can be reinforced. It can be enhanced by the tools at your disposal with Dwell. So to get started, go to dwellapp.io/relatable. When you do, you can get 10% off a yearly subscription or 33% off Dwell for life. That 33% off means you save $50. So go to dwellapp.io/relatable. dwellapp.io/relatable. How did you meet, and when did you meet your husband?
So we met in recovery, which is great because we share a lot of those values. But when we met, he was very early to sobriety. This was in 2017. And I had about 4 years of sobriety. He had like 90 days.
Oh, wow. So, really new.
Really new. And it's like a no-no to date somebody who's new when you have time. It's just not... And I knew what that first year or two was like for me and how much I needed to be single and have that time alone to, all this stuff is coming up. Like all your trauma, all your resentments, all your baggage, all the stuff you've just been throwing in the bag. They say that getting sober is like driving 100 miles an hour for 100 million miles and throwing all the garbage in the back seat, and then you slam on the brakes when you get sober and all the garbage comes forward.
You still have to deal with all of the garbage. Didn't actually just leave. You're trying to get away from it, right? Is that the metaphor?
Well,
and then
you're
you
just
stop
like
and you still have to
throwing
deal
it
with
in your
it.
back seat, and then you get sober, and it's like slamming on the brakes, and it all comes forward, and now you're just sitting in all of your garbage that you've been just throwing behind you, hoping you didn't have to think about.
Okay, so the driving 100 miles an hour was
just
the non-sobriety.
Drinking, yeah.
That was the drinking and the drugs, and then sobriety is the stopping.
Yeah,
and you have to deal with all of the trash. So there's in sobriety, I know that we're talking about how you met your husband, but just to take a little detour. So in sobriety, there's no way to not deal with the garbage that you've been driving with. Like, is that part of the recovery process, is working through all of the garbage that's in the trunk?
I think it's inevitable that it comes up. I'm sure you could find ways to avoid it. And they say it's like peeling an onion. And in my experience, that has been the case. You're only dealing with as much as you can, because if you deal with too much, often it will drive you out. You know, you don't want to deal with it's
overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be really overwhelming. If you're suddenly, dealing with dark trauma that on day 30 of being sober, it's too much. So I was, and just the process of going through the 12 steps takes you through all that garbage.
Yeah.
Like when you do a fourth step, it is literally an inventory of all your garbage. It's every fear you have, all of your resentments, every single person, place, thing, institution that you have a resentment for can go all the way back to kindergarten if you need to. And then you write, what instincts is that affecting? Like your pride, self-esteem, sex life, money, and your And then most important column is the what is your part in that. So you're really looking through all of that stuff and
taking responsibility
yes. for it. And this is after doing turning it over to some kind of higher power. Many people come into sobriety not having any sense of higher power or anything. It could be the group of the 12-step group.
Something bigger than you, something transcendent.
Yep.
And for you, this was back in 2013, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to decide if I want to go to the higher power direction or the husband direction. All right, okay, so that was 2013 for you. And then what does it look like in between 2013 and 2017 when you met your husband? Like, what does recovery long-term look like?
Oh, it's so hard. It's really a miracle anyone does it. And I tip my hat to anyone who does, because it's just a slog. I mean, it wasn't pretty for me the first 2 years. And I was working I was kind of this classic, I worked in a really strong program the first year. I threw myself into it. I went to meet. I had nothing to do in the beginning. I was waiting for this other waitressing job to start. So I was going to like 3 meetings a day just to stay sober. You have so much time suddenly that you didn't know you had. And
you're still working as a writer?
I was waitressing.
Oh,
so
okay.
I hadn't even started. I'd always wanted to be a writer, but I was never getting paid to be a writer until 2015.
Yeah.
So I just was slogging through it and doing comedy still. And I was
like stand up?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That was one of the other places that, just as a quick detour, where I was seeing a lot of censorship, and it was another one of the areas where I felt like I was being pushed out of the left. I was seeing it in the comedy world and even in myself. So I was still doing comedy during this time, and I was still waiting tables and just trying to put one foot in front of the other, working the steps, meditating. Was a big part of my early sobriety. Thank goodness for this one meeting. And then trying to heal my relationship to some kind of higher power, which had been damaged over the years. And
because you were raised Catholic, and then when did you decide, okay, I'm not Catholic? Or was it just kind of like
it just fell? Yeah, it just kind of fell by the wayside. I always joked I was a recovering Catholic. There was just so much guilt around sex, and I felt like it was so fear-based, and I think I just moved away from it and became more of like a hippie.
Yeah.
And I was a big stoner. I drank a lot, but I was like a huge stoner, and I did yoga, so I was very into like the woo. So my higher power for many years was like it was like a buffet from all of that, a lot of the new age stuff, a lot of like the great spirit, like nature just was a big one for me. Yep.
And do you still think that's how you kind of identify spiritually?
I think I'm more, I have an interesting relationship with God now, and my husband and I both struggle with this because he and I are both very skeptical in general. And we'll laugh at how because our relationship alone is like, it's crazy actually. The story's crazy. We met, it was in 2017 when we met. It was Valentine's Day, and the night before Valentine's Day, and it was called the sad party. I called it the sad party. It wasn't called the sad party. I was calling it that. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm going to the sad party. And it was to hopefully meet him. Because he had been in meetings, and I was kind of hoping to see him, which apparently is the only reason that he went. And we were talking, and he just asked me like such an insightful question that not even my therapist had ever asked me, which was, what was the quality of my emotional landscape? I mean, this is why I was a therapist.
Yeah.
What was the quality of my emotional landscape before I even started drinking? And I'd never even been thought about it. And I was like, well, fear. I was just always in fear. Mm. And then when I was leaving, we just kind of shook hands or touched hands. And there was this like electric pulse that went into my heart. I mean, I was letting my hand kind of drag behind me. And it was like something shot into my heart. And I turned around and I was like, what the hell was that? It was so weird. And then I got his number. We talked all night. We got breakfast the next morning on Valentine's Day. And I was like, I can't do this. You're 90 days. I feel horrible. We can't do this. It's just not. But we could not stop ourselves. And then
You just knew. Did you feel like you just knew?
At the time, but I'd also been through relationships with crazy people when there was that spark right away where it just fizzled out. So I didn't necessarily trust it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm going to Mass. I was going to, it was,
so you were
I still go to church.
You still go to Mass today?
Yeah, I still sometimes. It's not like I go religiously, but I still go. And it was when the Parkland shooting was. What was the why am I just having a brain fart? The one where you get the cross on your head. Oh my gosh.
I'm not Catholic.
I know. I'm just blanking.
You're not talking about Ash Wednesday,
Ash
are
Wednesday.
you?
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you. I'm just pregnant brain.
Yeah,
so
we'll talk about that
too. It was
too.
Ash Wednesday, and I was like, want to go to Mass with me? And he's like, sure. So our first date.
So he wasn't Catholic though.
No,
but he was just
nothing.
like, okay, I want to spend time with this girl.
Yeah, he was like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And we were in the program, talk a lot about God and think about it, and so we went and we walked in, and the guy who was like organizing where you sit, he was like, hey, can you two walk down the aisle and bring the Eucharist and the wine? And so the first date we ever had was in a church, and we walked down the aisle together.
Oh my gosh, it's poetic.
It really was crazy. And then we ended up, then we came out and there was a Parkland shooting, and I was so upset by it and just distraught. And he came over and was just so sweet and nice and loving. And I had no idea how to handle a man like him at all. I didn't even think he was real. It was like, I couldn't handle intimacy. I was like, intimacy's creepy, eye contact and sex. No, I just could not handle any of it. And we couldn't stay away from each other. We kept on dating, but I would cry in every therapy session because I was so torn by what I felt what I was doing the wrong thing, and also just my love for him. And he was getting kind of more and more clingy the more he felt me pulling away, which just wasn't good either because he was so new. I'm like, this is so common in early sobriety. Girl or guy will meet each other and they'll like make you their higher power. And so I broke up with him like 5 months into it and broke his heart. And I kind of didn't even think twice. I was like, I'm off to do my single thing. But also my work life was really starting to take off at that time. And
because this is like at the time where you were kind of becoming a cultural commentator accidentally.
Accidentally. And so we broke up, and then 15 months went by. My life drastically changed. That was right when I started doing like media, and I think my first media hit was on the Ben Shapiro election special, one of his, in 2018. And
talk about, that's a big deal. And that is like as conservative as it gets.
On Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like,
oh yeah. Okay. I was on that too. I don't think, we weren't on the same night, but I remember I was on one of those too. It's like a 4-week special on Fox. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was on with Lauren Chen and some crazy girl from Code Pink. Like a lunatic. Yeah. She like bombarded Ben in the middle of the interview with some question about Palestine that was complete. He asked her a question and she was like, well, let me, and he handled it so well, but it was complete non sequitur. And so
that was your big like conservative media debut.
Yes. And so let me back up. My husband comes from a very conservative background.
Oh, really?
And he's a Republican.
But not religious.
Yeah, not religious. More Republican, I guess. But conservative values. And his family was like MAGA,
Really?
They were parts of his family, definitely, yeah. And
but y'all met in LA. Is he from LA?
Yeah, he's from...
But they're MAGA.
Oh, yeah.
In LA.
But they were like in the desert and in like Valencia area, not like
I'm
LA.
not super familiar, but I guess it's just
like
not
suburbs.
all completely deep blue.
No, it's not at all. That's why I always laugh at people who are like, we needed to go, like these celebrities. They're like, we're going to Oklahoma to find somebody who's like these conservatives.
Yeah.
These Trump voters. I'm like, you could drive
County,
like 45 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you don't. You could go to Beverly Hills. Yeah. That's MAGA country.
Yeah.
And so, but he was so kind of turned off by all the MAGA, and mostly like the cult of personality. Being a therapist, I think he's just like, that is so dangerous and repellent. So he was very turned off, and he kind of came to the center, and he was going through his own stuff with depression. And then he found guys like Jordan Peterson, and so I'll never forget.
Jordan Peterson, the great gateway
the
drug.
Gateway drug. But he was actually, I think
says.
he made him more, like brought him more to the IDW side. And so I went to his house.
That's for people that don't know, because I don't even know if I've ever said that. That's the like
intellectual dark web.
Intellectual dark web.
Yeah, it was like self-termed by, I think, Eric Weinstein is the one who coined it.
And then I think like Barry Weiss talked about it in the New York Times.
Yeah, she wrote about it, and it was like this conglomerate of people who were all talking in this middle space. I mean, Joe Rogan really like made all of these people to a certain extent, because again, I think he really held the Overton window open.
It's this very heterodox world where I would call a lot of them now are probably considered conservative, and some of them are. Like Ben Shapiro is a part of it and stuff. But not everyone is like, certainly not MAGA, and certainly not everyone is necessarily on the right in the IDW.
No, I mean, Sam Harris certainly isn't. And Eric and Brett Weinstein, I think, still consider themselves liberals.
Yeah.
Dave, I would say, probably Ruben considered
he's
himself
conservative for sure. Yeah.
Now, there was a lot of fracturing that happened, I think, in that space throughout those years. Joe is still Joe, he's just I think he and I are very similar in that respect, and that
well, listening to y'all's conversation, for sure. I mean, I know that we're going on another detour. Like when I'm listening to him, I'm like, you sound conservative in so many ways, even though I know that he and I probably disagree on like a lot of social things like you and I do. But just hearing him even talk about like vaccine mandates and things like that, and different things like, a woman is a woman, not like just a uterus haver. That now gets you labeled as conservative.
Right.
And I actually appreciate the heterodox characteristic of people like you and Joe Rogan. Like, I like that you guys disagree on a lot of stuff, because I feel like you guys have a power to persuade someone on the other side that maybe someone on the other side would write me off because they know I'm a Christian.
Right.
Even though I don't think that's a reason to write someone off, someone else might. I like that we have a lot of heterodox people now that are considered right wing. Like Dave Chappelle and I probably disagree on everything, but I appreciate his willingness to be like, you know what, I'm not going to be summoned by this group of people. Yeah. Anyway,
it seems like going. Principles of freedom. That's really where there's like this group that's for it, and there's a group that's more for centralization and mandates and
speech policing and all that.
Yeah. So the first time I ever went to my husband's place, he had all these books, and it was like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Christina Hoff Sommers, the Gulag Archipelago, and I took a picture of it, and I was like, this is a guy who's like, I'm on a first date, and my audience was half like run, and the other half was like, how did you find this guy in LA? Yeah. And so we shared a lot. We just could have like robust conversations, and because I come from the left and he comes from the right, we have really interesting reactions to news stories, and we're both very aware of our biases. And it's funny to this is the podcast I want to start with him, is where we talk about a lot of the mental health and addiction and all this stuff, but also like just the different ways we'll react to a news story just because of our factory setting programming. So it was great. We just always had stuff to talk about, and he challenges me. He's much smarter than me and brilliant, just brilliant. Reads all the time.
But y'all broke up after 5
months. We broke up,
months.
And then 15 months later, I was like, I'm coming back to that meeting. And he had stopped kind of emailing me and being like, why we are meant to be together. And I was like, go away, you're a stalker. I'm like, aren't you supposed to be a therapist? You need to check yourself. And he did. And then he went through like a montage. I think we were both in like montage sequences, but he was really in one where it was like, grew a beard, got his degree to be an LMFT. He just bulked up. I mean, so we went to get coffee. I was like, looks good. I mean, he always looked good, but he looked really good. I was like, you're really hot. And then we we went and got coffee, and we were supposed to go watch some comedy, and I didn't want to do that, and we ended up going to dinner at Malibu, and we were together ever since. And that was like September of 2019. And then I had an ectopic pregnancy right away. I got pregnant like immediately right when we got back together. And that was pretty like traumatic and horrible. And it was really showed me what kind of man he was. He was just there by my side through all of it, made sure I was okay, was so loving.
Y'all were still dating at this point.
We were just
right?
dating, yep. And then we went through that. Then we got engaged, and then the whole world shut down. And then we were quarantined together because he was working at a grocery store at that time, and I was sick. And so I was living with my roommate, but she didn't want me to come back home. So he and I were in his apartment, quarantined for like 2-3 weeks together. And we really got to know each other in that time too, under this crazy duress of the whole world was going through, and just living through that together and being together nonstop, day in and day out. I was like, I could live with this man.
I could do this forever. Yeah.
Yep. And so, yeah, we got married in November. It'll be year November 10th.
Oh my gosh. Hasn't this year gone by so fast?
It's crazy.
The past couple of years have been such a blur.
It's such a blur. And this past year, I'm like, can't believe it's already been a year.
Yeah.
And then now I'm also pregnant.
Now you're pregnant. Okay, so were y'all trying to get pregnant from the very beginning of marriage?
We weren't trying. We just weren't not trying.
Yeah, it's the not trying stage.
Yeah, it's the like trying, but it's not exactly like I'm young. I didn't have too much time. I think I really always was like, this is in God's hands. And this is why I say my faith in God now, because of the way things have unfolded in ways in which I cannot comprehend and are truly like, how much evidence do I need?
Yeah.
That something is at work. Yeah. I don't know what, but when I really get out of my own way in those early days of being pregnant, the past 3 months, I've really had to turn inward and turn over. I mean, I've been praying every day. I mean, my husband and I pray every morning anyway. We say the 3rd step prayer from 12 step. We say it together. But that's like as religious as we get.
And what's that?
God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou will. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties that victory over them may bear witness to those I may help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. And then that's it. May I do thy will always. But I love the relieve me of the bondage of self. He got that inscribed in like an Etsy wood thing, and we have it.
I mean, that's huge. And that's so like, that's so countercultural. That's like, I mean, kind of what we talked about on your show.
Yeah.
It's like the bondage of self. We hear that more self is going to liberate us today.
Yeah.
And the gospel tells us the opposite. And you're repeating that to yourself every morning.
Yeah.
Without even really knowing fully what you believe. It sounds like that's what you were about to say, right?
Yeah, that is really, I try to ground myself, and I know that when I'm out of my own will, my life I am better. And by out of my own will, when I'm not attached to results, when I'm not comparing to other people, when I'm not trying to manage the world in the way that I think it should be, and really getting pregnant at 42 out of the freaking blue. I was told that I was in menopause. Like, it's truly like a freaking miracle child.
So all of a sudden, I want to hear, how did you figure out you were pregnant?
So it's crazy. In June, I was told that I was pregnant, or that I was in menopause, but they couldn't. She wanted to put me on birth control, but couldn't, because I also had to get a lump in my boob checked. It's all fine, but I needed a biopsy. So she's like, we can't add hormones until you get your biopsy. And that means,
just like, think about even like
the timing.
Yes.
I know. If I got on birth control, I was thinking about that today. And
crazy.
But again, it's so much of like letting go. So much of it has been letting go. I've been just trying to. We went and talked to a fertility specialist, and he was like, looking at your levels, it's going to be like a miracle if we're hoping for that like one golden egg. And I'm not going to lie, it's going to be hard. And maybe not even possible. And he had me order all these prenatals, and I got them like $250 worth, which because I got them from them, which was stupid, but I got them all. And not just prenatals, it was also like ubiquinol, which is something you take to increase, it helps like strengthen cell growth and can help with like egg strength. And so I started taking them, and then I was like, I looked at them when I got them like, what am I doing? I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't want this. I don't want to try and force this, because I really wrestled with forcing this thing at this age, when I felt like if I had really wanted it, I would have already done it. And I also was like, God has a plan for us. You know, maybe that's not what we're supposed to do. Maybe we're supposed to adopt. Maybe there are other ways of being parents. And we're not exactly rich. That it's a lot of money. If some insurances pay for some of it, but it's still a lot of money. And I was mad that I spent the money on those prenatals, and my therapist was like, well, just take them. They're good for your hair and your nails and your skin. So just take them.
Yeah.
And I started taking them, and then we went back. He hadn't met my family because we got married in COVID, and they'd never met him. So in July or August, we went home. I started taking them like July, and sometime in August we went home, and he met everybody, all the babies. My sister had a baby. My sister-in-law had her third child, and I kept waiting for like the pang of longing. And my other sister has teenage boys. She started very young. And so we saw how hard it was and the reality, but we sat on the beach, and I was like, are you okay if we don't have kids? Are you okay with that? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine if you're okay with that. He's like, I just worry and get emotional. He's like, I just don't want you to regret anything. And I was like, I couldn't like bear to, I've seen women go through that, like fertility, and it can be so heartbreaking, and you invest yourself in it, and then you're disappointed. And sometimes it works, and it's like a miracle. And I know so many people who are like, do it, try. It's like this huge blessing. But I also didn't want to like lose my mind over it. And we just decided that we were fine with that. And he's like, I remember going on that walk, and we came back home. I went and saw my OB to get the pills, the birth control pills. And she gave them to me, and I, for some reason, didn't take them. Mind you, I was taking prenatals every single day during that vacation, like religiously. I never take any pills like this. This is so unlike me. And I came back, and I was about to book all these travels, and he's like, will you please take a pregnancy test? Because my boobs were sore, and I was like exhausted. And he's like, Bridget, I think you might be pregnant. And
you were just like, no.
I hadn't got my period. So the reason I thought I was in menopause was I got vaccinated, didn't get my period for 90 days. Now that could be my age, or it could just be like one of the weird vaccine things. And then I got it, and I got it again. So I got it in June, and that's when I went and talked to her, and she's like, let's test your levels. You're in menopause. And then I got it again in July. And so when I went to see her again, when I got back in August, I was like, I haven't had my period in like 40 days. And she was like, that's just the menopause. Didn't even test me.
Wow. So you're like, okay.
Like, give me a freaking pregnancy test.
Wow.
Which is actually kind of negligent, given my history of ectopic. Right. You are more likely to have an ectopic. So he, a week later, was like, will you please take this test just for peace of mind before you go to South Africa? And I was supposed to go to Europe and like all these places and New York. And I took it. I was like, fine, I'll take it. It's going to be negative.
Was
and
it
I took
digital or was it one of the lines?
Like lines.
Yeah. And
I took it, and I was like, see? And the one line popped up, and then like immediately the other one popped up.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
what was your reaction? Was it just like you couldn't believe it?
I called my best friend immediately. Like I texted her. I was like, holy, because she's pregnant with twins, and it's IVF.
Wow.
And she's pregnant with two twin girls, and it's like 4 days. We're 4 days apart. So she's like my spiritual sister of life. We've known each other. We met in Catholic school, actually, when we were in first grade. And I was like, I don't know what to do. And she's just kind of like walked me through it. And she was like, you need to get into a doctor, because F her. She should have you should have known this a week ago.
Yeah.
And she basically came and saw me and did an ultrasound. She's like, it's in there. There's a sac. It's not necessarily, it was 5 weeks.
Oh, yeah. So you can't
Not
see
even
the heartbeat.
viable.
Yeah,
Nothing.
yeah.
It's just literally was just a sac.
Yeah.
And she was like, I was like, how do I make it stick? And she's like, honey, if I knew that, I'd be like a billionaire on the private island.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So.
But you could at least see that it wasn't an ectopic pregnancy.
That's what I needed to know.
It's in the uterus. Yeah.
Yep. And so she was like, no, it's intrauterine. You know, it's like,
Which
she's
is
like, and there's
good
all
news.
this like healthy whatever it's called, like that, like white healthy stuff you see around it. And I was like, holy crap. But then it was just like, well, we wait. And so I got a new OB.
Yeah.
And made an appointment. And at 6 weeks, it was weird. It was like, right when the abortion ban came down, the 6-week abortion ban happened, I was 6 weeks. That was like the exact same week.
Yeah.
In Texas. And that was when you can't hear the heartbeat yet, but you can see it. Mm-hmm. So that was a like very strange experience.
Have you had another ultrasound since then?
I've had 2 more. I had to go every 2 weeks because I'm a geriatric.
One more ad for the day, and that, of course, is Good Rancher. So those of you out there who care about putting America first, maybe you're realizing that America as a whole, and maybe we as individuals have relied too much on foreign imports, that we are relying too much on the meat that is being imported from overseas, and that has actually caused over 100,000 farms and ranches to shut down just since 2015. I mean, we're talking about our fellow Americans. We're talking about human beings with families who have lost their livelihood because of our reliance on foreign meat. Good Ranchers is setting out to change that. They want to revitalize the American farming and ranching industry, but they need our support. Thankfully, a lot of relatable listeners have supported them over the past few months. You guys have loved Good Ranchers. You've loved your experience with them, and they're making sure that experience is just going to keep getting better. They've hired a ton of new customer service reps to make sure all of your needs are met in a courteous and expeditious way. And so they're really excited to serve you, especially this holiday season. They've got a limited time offer for my listeners just until the end of November. If you go to goodranchers.com/Allie, you get your box of meat, you get 10 free bistro medallions with that. That's $100 value. Plus, if you subscribe, so you get that box of meat every month, you get $25 off each box for life. And if you use my code Allie or my link, goodranchers.com/Allie, you get free express shipping. So really good deal. With my link, you get those 10 free bistro medallions, you get free express shipping, and then if you subscribe, that $25 off each box for life. Totally worth it. We love Good Ranchers in my family. Go to goodranchers.com/Allie, goodranchers.com/Allie. What was it like when you saw, because at 8 weeks, it looks almost like this little jelly bean with this like little beating heart. And then for me, like it was such a big difference from that was the first time I had at 8 weeks. And then the second time I had one at 11 and a half weeks. And then all of a sudden it was a baby.
Yeah,
like,
no, it's
all
crazy.
Of a sudden, kicking, moving, like flipping around. I saw the brain, the ribs, the teeth. That was insane. That was when I like just lost it. Was that like surprising for you?
Well, it's weird because I saw it from the sack, and then it was really just, I don't really remember. It feels like a blur because I was in that weird purgatory of knowing I was pregnant, but like I had to turn it over. And I didn't want to, I was saying on Rogan, like I really had to turn it into like a new age mantra person because I have so much fear and really had to face feeling like I didn't deserve it. And I was like, why do you feel like you don't deserve this child? And the fear, just the natural fear everyone has about those scans in the early days, and so much can go wrong, and I'm older, so even more can go wrong. And I just really had to pray. I read my little like readings every morning and turned it over. I was like, I kept just telling myself, God's got this. Like, this is in God's hands, and whatever will be. And then I saw it again at 8 weeks, and that was when I got to hear the heart, and that was crazy. And emotional. And then I saw again at 10 weeks because he wanted me to come just to make sure, because the first day of my last period it's not accurate at all from when I actually conceived. So he was like, we want to just make sure that you're on track with the development. And then they did the test at the 10 and a half weeks for chromosomal abnormalities in the sex. And that's when we found out it was a girl and things were looking healthy. And at that point too, I was really coming to terms with like, would it even matter if it came back? You know, like they do all these screenings and they're like, well, this is so you can make a decision. I'm like I've made the decision. I don't think I could be like, I don't want that. Like no matter what.
Right.
It felt like such a miracle that no matter what, it felt like it was supposed to be, no matter whether it was Down syndrome or healthy. It's still very new. There's still
baby.
Yeah. So then he got to come with me for the like 13-week one where they do the NT test, they like measure the water in the base of the skull and the bridge of the nose. They do a lot with like geriatrics. and
they legitimately do call it a geriatric
no, they do.
Pregnancy. You're not just saying that. They call it geriatric even though you're not geriatric.
No, it's
like over 32, I
35.
think. They call it geriatric.
Yeah,
which is
crazy.
But it's good that they're being
on the
careful.
side of caution.
Yeah.
And then that's when I was like, holy crap, it went from this little like tadpole to like baby.
Arms, legs,
like she had fingers and legs and arms and like you said, you could see the brain still. And the spine.
You can see it all. It's
she was
crazy.
like yawning. I was like, oh my God, this is so crazy. And then he's like, okay, we'll see you in a month. Everything boring and normal
and that's
so
where
far.
you are right now. You're waiting.
Yeah, but I feel I wouldn't even let myself get excited.
Yeah.
And I think it was like a weird, I'm, cautiously optimistic by nature about everything. Even if it's like business, I'm just like that. But in this instance, it was kind of, I would talk to my therapist about it, like what a funny form of self-protection, as if I wouldn't be enormously disappointed even if I got excited.
Yeah.
It's like a weird form of self-protection. Like I'm not still going to be crushed if something happened. But it's just she's like, you have a messed up upbringing. Like this is normal. And many people are, she's like, I was superstitious. It's not uncommon. But it also felt like a weird way of me trying to control something I had no control over.
You don't.
So now I have 14 weeks and it's weird because I'm feeling better. So I'm like, oh, am I pregnant?
Yeah.
It's like you go from being reminded of it every day, all day.
Because you're sick. And then, but the second trimester is so much better. And then kind of what we were talking about before we started recording, that third trimester is when you like don't really want to do anything. Mm-hmm. Well, towards the end of it, you'll probably, you might feel great all the way through the end, but I went all the way to almost 42 weeks with both of my kids, which is a long time to be pregnant. And you get really uncomfortable. And plus I gained like 1 million pounds. Some people don't, and they feel and look great. But towards the end, I was super uncomfortable. But there's that sweet spot. Yeah. And you're about to enter into it. Yeah. From like 16 to 28 weeks.
That's what everyone says, where it's like you have the cute bump and like you're feeling horny.
Well, you like look really cute. Yeah. And so it's a good time. It's a good time.
It's so weird. I'm like, I hope she's fine down there because you're kind of like.
Well, and you can't feel her yet. No. And you will. Like in a few weeks, you'll feel her. And so that'll be your indicator, Yeah. Like, oh, okay, she just kicked. She's fine. But right now it's like, are you even in there? Yeah. Because she's like what? Like the size of like
a lemon or something?
Yeah. Which is so insane.
Tiny.
It's so crazy. Man, there's so many other things I could ask you. The last thing, since we're running out of time. I wonder if your view about God and that higher power, do you feel like it's changed as your kind of cultural views have changed and even your views of motherhood and marriage and yourself have all changed? And do you think that it will continue to evolve?
Yeah, if I've learned anything, that it's just that I'm constantly evolving. Like I don't know anything. I'm constantly reminded how little I know. I just don't, sitting on that beach and being like, I'm fine we're good. We don't need to have kids. And then finding out we're pregnant. We were laughing because it's that old saying of man plans and God laughs.
Yeah.
And that's all I've been
like all
thinking.
the little things with like the lump in your breast, not being able to be on birth control.
All of
like
it.
all the little things so clearly work together.
I know. And it is like a little, it's crazy. It was really fun telling his mom. That was like my most exciting thing. We just surprised her. We waited to tell most of our family. I told friends and people that I would need if something went wrong and I would need support from girlfriends, but I didn't tell my dad or like his mom until we got a lot of the testing back and knew what the sex was. So because I didn't want her to have to go through all of the it was anxiety, a lot of anxiety, just trying to manage the anxiety and be like my dumb little mantra of like, I'm in perfect health, my baby's in perfect health, this pregnancy is going to go perfectly. It's just like, or whatever it will be, but just trying to manage
be
that,
positive about it,
counterbalance the negative.
Yeah.
It's been a journey. I do think it has evolved, and I mean, it's hard for me not to believe in God. When I saw that heartbeat, I was like, I don't understand anything.
Yeah. Well, I just hearing you tell your story, not just motherhood, but from the very beginning, I see the providence of God and the specificity in his plans and purposes for you. And even just like hearing you wrestle through a lot of the lies that all of us have believed lies at one point, but hearing the lies that like accompanied addiction and then overcoming them with sobriety, like I certainly see what we would say like is the hand of the Lord. And even you repeating, gosh, I think that's such a solid and good prayer that you repeat every morning. If it's worth anything, I feel like I see the Lord in your life and has worked so clearly throughout your life and in the life of your little girl. And so it's really encouraging. I think a lot of people are going to be encouraged by this too. Where can people find you, support you, follow you?
You can find me at Walk-Ins Welcome is my podcast. So please subscribe. We have talked to all kinds of lovely people like yours truly. You
like yours truly, like me.
You, not me. And we also have Dumpster Fire, which is on YouTube and Rumble, and my website where you can subscribe. It's like a whole community of very politically homeless people, where we talk about all kinds of things, but I do workouts with the women every day. We do it on Zoom, which I love.
Okay, I didn't know that somehow.
I'll give you the link.
Wow, I should do that because
It's
I'm not
amazing.
working out right now and I need to be.
It's a half hour. It's tons of women who just had babies, honestly, like
Great.
3 or 4 of them. And it's only a half hour. And
Are
it's
you
like,
leading the workout?
No, I stream this one woman that I love, and we all just
do it
follow.
together.
It's really just like hold each other accountable and to show up.
What time is it?
It would be like 2:00 your time.
And I can turn off my camera?
Oh, yeah. Everybody does if they
Great.
want to.
That's good.
Yeah. No, it's such a great, supportive, amazing group of women. And they're just, we've walked through like all kinds of stuff. And yeah, I think 3 of them just had babies and some are pregnant. Now I just found out like 3 of us are pregnant in there. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I have a subscriber site, and it's not even that expensive actually. It's just really a place where we put like the unedited dumpster fire and just extra content.
Yeah.
It's a safe space.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you so much, Bridget. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on.
I really love you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.